We've all heard the advice to always have a tripod on you. In fact, the bigger and heavier the tripod, the better. It'll give you sharper pictures, better image quality, and in fact, it slows you down, but that's a good thing. I'm gonna go against some of that advice. I'm gonna tell you sometimes leave a tripod at home, and I'll show you how and why that'll give you better image quality. You'll still see me out there shooting with a tripod. There are times when it's important, but some people are overusing that, and I learned that just last night. I went out to shoot the moonrise at the Statue of Liberty, and literally every photographer there had a tripod on them. I probably shot the moonrise 50 times. And the first dozen times I did it, I think I used a tripod. And then I realized it was actually holding me back. First, a tripod is a pain to carry. The space in my bag could be consumed by a couple of lenses. And then when I get to the spot, it still takes a few seconds to unfold it and set it up. But really the biggest problem is that once you get it set up, it's gonna limit what you can shoot. It limits your mobility because now your camera is attached to this. And yes, you can pick up your tripod and you can move it a few feet. And yes, it has adjustments so you can raise or lower it. But all that takes significantly more time than just bending your knees a little bit or taking a step to the side. Unconsciously, that's going to make you stick to your original composition. That's going to prevent you from freely moving about and exploring different configurations. It's also going to limit your camera height. You're not going to go straight to the ground because even if your tripod could do it, it would involve taking your tripod apart. So what difference does that make? Look at these two pictures of the moonrise and the Statue of Liberty. Just being able to move the camera a couple inches or a couple of feet up or down a little bit more readily make a difference. Yeah, it did. Because I saw a lot of pictures of the moonrise from the Statue of Liberty from people using tripods. And none of the compositions were quite as perfect as I was able to get. Now, I'm not flexing here. I'm sure I look like an idiot because I was running around, scrambling, moving even just inches or feet at a time to make sure that the moon was very perfectly aligned. I was only able to get those pictures aligned because I was not limited by a tripod. So maybe the tripod, in this case, produced technically better images. But artistically, being free from the burden of a tripod, I think, made a bigger difference in the overall image. Many people use tripods for big, heavy wildlife photos, and I think this is often a huge mistake. Now, if I'm shooting video, yeah, I'm on a big gimbal tripod because video needs to be stable. But I almost never use a tripod for wildlife stills. Here's a story. I went to Conowingo Dam, probably the most famous place for photographing bald eagles, and there were hundreds of dentists there lined up with their 600 f4s on big gimbal tripods. The best shot the whole morning that I was there was a bald eagle came directly at us and flew right over our head. And of the hundreds of people there, I was the only one who got it because everybody else was on a tripod. The tripod limited the range of motion so much that they couldn't get it in the frame when it got close. I was able to just tilt the camera up and get it when it was very close. It's the best shot because the bird was close. The tripod is helpful when the bird is far away because it doesn't wear out your arms. It has unlimited patience. You're not going to disturb the bird as you pick it up. But the best shot of the day was impossible to get on a tripod. I've also had gear damaged at least 4 times because something happened with the tripod. I had my camera on a tripod and it got caught on a button on my shirt. Or the dog ran into the tripod. Not once, but twice, knocked the whole tripod over. I think gear is more likely to be damaged on a tripod. Why? Because you'll step away from it. Why? Because it's got big legs that can be walked into. It's something that can now be knocked over. And if the camera's in your hands, on a strap around your neck, those things are less likely to happen. We think of tripods as conveying more stability to your camera, but they're only as stable as the ground they're resting on. And if the ground is vibrating a little bit, that motion is going to be transferred directly to your camera. That's more common than you think. An awful lot of photography happens on slightly unstable ground that you might not perceive until you actually start trying to take pictures of it. Like every time you're photographing something on a pier, which is very common, that pier moves just a little bit. I found the entire city of New York City shakes just a little bit because there's subways running underneath, because the wind is blowing buildings and the buildings are transferring that energy to the ground. When you're hand holding a camera, your body is absorbing a lot of those little micro shocks, especially with camera stabilization. I've seen people set up tripods on boats. I'm serious. In many situations, the fact that your body and your arms will absorb the little micro vibrations from the world around you can actually produce sharper images. Let's talk about how to get sharp clean images without having to use a tripod. The first is, of course, to move some of that stabilization into your camera and lens. Optical, lens stabilization, sensor stabilization, they're very, very, very helpful. And if you have a choice between a camera that has that and doesn't have that, absolutely pick the camera with more stabilization. Besides camera stabilization, you can do some human stabilization. You can improve how steady your own hands are. I've had so many people comment that I'm a robot because my hands are that steady, because I get extremely long, clear, handheld shots. But there's nothing special about my body. I've just learned to pay attention to it. In a quiet moment, take some time and listen to your breath. Feel your heartbeat. Learn to just inhale and exhale smoothly and slowly. Your most stable moments are going to come at the end of your respiratory cycle, when you've finished exhaling before you start inhaling. Hold up a glass of water and just look at it. Relax yourself until no part of the glass or the water is shaking at all. Spend some time learning to be calm and still. And then test yourself. Get your camera, put your favorite lens on it, try different focal lengths, and then use what I call the rule of doubles. Start at the reciprocal of your focal length. That means if you're at 50 millimeters, start at about 1/50th. Doesn't matter if it's 1/60th or whatever. Take 10 shots, preferably a subject with specular highlights. And by that, I mean a bottle where a bit of light might reflect off of an edge. That little bit of light is going to make it very clear if there's absolutely any camera shake in the images that you're taking. Put your camera into continuous shutter mode and take 10 shots. Now double your shutter speed. Go from 1/50th to 1/25th. Take 10 more shots. Double your shutter speed. 1/12th, 1/6th, 1/3. Go all the way to a full second. Take 10 shots with each. Then load them onto your computer and zoom in to 200% and count all the pictures that are nice and sharp versus the pictures that are unsharp. You're not going to see that there's a particular shutter speed where you get sharp shots. You will figure out different percentages. Maybe you get 80% sharp at 1/60th, 50% sharp at 1/30th, and 10% sharp at 1/15th. Now you know. The next time you're out shooting and you want a clear shot, you could shoot it at 1/60th and probably get it sharp. Or you could go all the way down to 1/15th and take 10 shots and then delete 9 of them. And now you're gathering 4 times more light. In low light conditions, going from 1/60th to 1/15th, that's 2 stops. That's the same difference in image quality as going from micro four thirds to a full frame camera. That's a really big deal. And knowing that you can just take a whole bunch of shots and get one sharp at a particular shutter speed is incredibly valuable. How you hold the camera makes a big difference. A lot of people just kind of do this without really thinking about it. With a telephoto lens like this, you are better off holding the camera up against your eye, nice and firmly. And now tuck your elbows into your body. And if there's a bird coming at you or an athlete coming at you, exhale smoothly and slowly and just smoothly hold your finger on the shutter and shoot continuously for however many shots you need. Obviously, none of this matters if you're shooting at 1/2000th of a second, but often, both sports and wildlife, you want to use longer shutter speeds, either to gather more light or maybe to actually intentionally show a little bit of subject motion and convey that motion in your final picture. If you're not using a telephoto lens, I'm actually going to recommend you take the camera away from your eye. I know everybody tells you eye to the viewfinder is going to make it most stable, but my own experimentation has showed otherwise. I actually find photos are way more stable when I have it cradled in my hand like this. Don't grab the grip. Grabbing the grip makes your hand kind of clench up like this, and I think that leads to instability. Cradle it gently like this. And if your shutter button is on the top of your camera, use your thumb to press the shutter. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch the camera strap out around my neck and hold the camera out like this. Now my elbows are against my body. I'm holding the camera out and the strap is taut. And this is extremely stable. I tested this with a Canon R5 Mark II at 70 millimeters and got almost a full stop better stabilization using my cradling technique than I did when shooting with the camera at eye level. And even with a 100 megapixel camera body, I've gotten sharp shots several stops below the reciprocal rule, even though this camera has absolutely no stabilization whatsoever. One camera setting to change is to make sure that you use continuous shooting at the highest possible frames per second. When I was shooting the moonrise, I was using a sports and wildlife camera, the Sony A1, and it was really shooting at that highest possible frames per second because I know I need to take 5 or 10 shots in order to be sure that I get one shot sharp. So I'm going to take 5 or 10 shots because this is digital. It's free. I published 2 pictures of Lady Liberty from that night. I took 1,803 photos. That means I'm going to delete 1,801 photos. And all that cost me nothing. It seems wasteful. You can call it spray and pray, but I call it results. When you're shooting continuously, be aware the first and last picture you take are much more likely to be shaky. This is called shutter shock. No matter how gentle you are when pressing the shutter, when you do this, you're going to move the camera just a little bit. I found this experimentally. I would take bursts of 10 or 20 photos. The odds that the first or the last photo are a little bit shaky are much higher than those in the middle. So even when I'm reviewing my photos, I don't scroll back to the last picture I took. I always scroll back 2 or 3 images in. Images in the middle of the burst are much more likely to be sharp. Well, let's talk about shutter speed. Out in the field when I'm taking pictures, there's no one shutter speed that I settle on because I want safety images. There can be lots of things that I won't notice at the time that might make my shots shaky or that might make me a little more stable. So I'm often varying the shutter speed. I got lots of shots at 1/60th because I tested myself. I knew 1/60th and 600 millimeters, I was going to get almost every shot without camera shake. Those are my safety shots. But then after I got my safety shot, I'm using shutter priority here. I used slower and slower shutter speeds. And every time I went slower, I took more and more photos. That's what I call the rule of doubles. Take 10 photos at 1/60th. Now drop to 1/30th. You're doubling the shutter speed and you're doubling the number of pictures. So now I'm taking 20 photos. Go to 1/15th. Now I'm taking 40 photos, and so on. The slower you go, the more photos you take. But don't forget those safety shots, because at some point, you'll be overestimating your capabilities and you'll be glad you got some with a faster shutter speed. All those pictures that I shot continuously, I'll scroll through them, and anything that's sharp, I just mark it. And then I take all those sharp pictures that were taken in a sequence and I import them as layers into Photoshop. I use Photoshop to align those layers, and then I average them together. This produces very similar results to a single long exposure, but because you could skip some sequential images that weren't quite sharp enough, it's giving you a much higher chance of success. Because if there's a tiny vibration in the middle of a long exposure, the entire exposure is ruined. If heat rising off the ground causes waves in the atmosphere that ruin the sharpness of your photo, the entire long exposure is gone. But if you're shooting multiple short shots and combining them later, you can kind of break time up, deleting the little bits of time that were ruined by vibrations or heat waves, and create an image that would not be possible with a single long exposure. Besides making yourself more steady, you can find makeshift support just about anywhere. First, I often just lay on the ground and put the camera right on the ground. This is going to make it much more stable. Is it as stable as a tripod? Probably not. But if you didn't bring a tripod, it can work. I will rest my camera on rocks. I will rest it on the shoulder of a friend or on a fence. Just be careful that whatever you're resting on is stable. Like sometimes fences will shake a little bit because somebody else is grabbing it or it's attached to a pier or something that's shaking. You don't want to rest your camera on anything that's not completely stable. If you're shooting from a car, rest it on the windowsill. Or if you're outside the car, rest it on top of your car. If you have the choice between holding a camera directly up to your eye or holding it away from your body and resting it on something, hold it away from your body and rest it on something. That's gonna much more likely produce stable results with longer exposures. In summary, I'm not telling you to throw your tripod away. No, everybody should have a tripod, and there are lots of times when the tripod is the right thing. But do recognize the limitations. Recognize your unconscious resistance to adjust and move the tripod. Recognize that the freedom of movement and the perfection of composition that you can achieve by being able to go a little lower or a little higher without thinking about it, that's probably going to improve your images more than being able to use a slightly longer shutter speed and a slightly lower ISO. Even if you're a diehard tripod fan, learn these techniques because there are times when you can't use a tripod. crowded streets, churches. So many venues do not allow tripods. And in those times, you're going to be glad that you took the time to test yourself, figure out what shutter speeds you can use, and develop these techniques for improving the stabilization of your images. Write a comment down below with your own thoughts, your own experiences, especially if you've developed other techniques to help yourself get stable images. And hey, follow me on Instagram because I'm finally awake and using Instagram, so you'll see a steady stream of short videos and pictures that I'm taking. Bye.